Here was the alien girl whose life I had saved all those years ago, and now she was a queen. There's no dignified way to crash land a starship. No matter how many simulations you run or how expensive your insurance policy is, the result is always the same. Fire, gravity doing its worst, and a lot of very loud alarms that sound suspiciously like they're yelling at you personally. Captain Rhys Anders' final descent onto Elan 4 was no different. One moment he was cruising at a safe altitude, humming an off-key version of Moonlight in hyperdrive, and the next, his dashboard lit up like a disco club on Saturn. Something had gone very wrong in the engine core. Something with sparks and fire. Definitely more fire than one generally liked to have while flying. The navigation system screeched, the artificial gravity hiccuped, and then Elan 4's jungle canopy rushed up like it had a personal vendetta. He remembered trees, a lot of trees, then darkness. When he woke, his head felt like it had been chewed by a solar bear and spit into a blender. The cockpit was sideways. Sparks still fizzled somewhere behind him. His boots were missing. Why were his boots always the first thing to go? And a neon green insect the size of a dachshund was licking his forehead. It blinked at him with 9 eyes. Rhys blinked back. "Well," he rasped, voice dry as Martian sand. "Nice to meet you too." The bug hissed and scuttled off into the underbrush. He crawled out of the wreckage with all the grace of a sleep-deprived sloth. The jungle of Elan 4 was humid, pulsing with strange bioluminescent life. Trees towered above him like natural skyscrapers, their bark shifting in patterns as though breathing. The air was thick with scents, sweet, metallic, and slightly threatening. Rhys looked around, pulled out his cracked scanner, and muttered, "Welcome to vacation hell." It was supposed to be a simple supply run. Drop off some communication nodes to the Alani tribal outposts, check in on a couple of research camps, and get home in time to catch the final of the interplanetary bake-off. Instead, his ship was now a steaming pile of scrap, and he was deep in unknown territory, which, according to the brochure, was untouched by modern civilization. Rhys now suspected that untouched also meant unmapped, unhelpful, and full of bugs with bad attitudes. He set off with his emergency pack, limping slightly and trying not to step on anything that glowed menacingly. It was 2 hours into the march, after falling into a mud pit that may or may not have been sentient and apologizing to a plant he'd accidentally insulted, that he heard it, a high, strange cry, not quite human, but not entirely alien either. Rhys stopped, listened. The sound came again, a whimpering noise like a wounded animal or a really bad singer trapped under something heavy. Against his better judgment, he turned toward it. He found her in a clearing dappled with light from the twin suns above. A small figure, no older than 10 maybe, slumped against a tree. Her skin was a soft silver gray, her hair braided with leaves and metal beads. But what caught him were her ears, long, elegant, swept back like antennae sculpted by an artist on hallucinogens. She looked at him with wide, liquid eyes. One leg was twisted at an unnatural angle. "Hey there," Rhys said gently, dropping to a crouch. "You hurt?" She flinched, clicked something in her throat, a language he didn't understand, but the pain was clear on her face. Rhys reached slowly into his pack. "Okay, let's do this the intergalactic scout way." He held up a med patch. "This doesn't taste like candy, but it won't kill you." "Probably." The girl squinted at it, then at him. Her ears twitched. "I'm Rhys," he offered, pressing the patch to her leg. "Captain Rhys Ander of the Gloryhound. Shipwreck survivor, licensed pilot, and only slightly radioactive." She said something in her language. He had no idea what it meant, but she looked slightly less terrified now, so he took it as a good sign. It took hours to fashion a crude stretcher, carry her back toward where he hoped a rescue beacon might reach orbit, and keep the jungle from eating either of them. She never spoke again, just watched him with those luminous eyes. At one point, he tripped on a root and nearly dropped her, prompting her to make a sound that might have been laughter. He chose to believe it was. When the evac drone finally arrived, it was nearing nightfall. The girl was taken gently by tall figures in leaf-armored suits, speaking in low tones and nodding solemnly at Rhys. One touched his shoulder, a gesture of thanks perhaps. Then they vanished into the foliage. He never learned her name, didn't know if she'd survived fully or remembered him at all. Reese left Elin 4 a week later with a ship full of bruises and a head full of strange, soft memories. He never filed a report about her. Something told him it wouldn't be understood, or maybe he wanted to keep that piece of magic for himself. Years passed. Planets came and went. He took jobs, fought pirates, drank too much synthale, and got thrown out of a gambling den on Mars too for impersonating a famous singer. He still insisted the resemblance was uncanny. And then one day, out of nowhere, a royal invitation arrived, embossed in real foil, sealed with a sigil he didn't recognize. Written in Elanian standard, it read, "The Queen of Elan 4 respectfully summons Captain Reese Ander to her court. The matter is urgent. Come at once." Reese reread it twice. Then he poured himself a drink, sat back in his chair, and laughed. Long, loud, and just slightly hysterical. "Well," he muttered, raising the glass to no one. "Guess she remembered." Reese had always considered himself unfit for courtly environments. Not because he lacked charm. He had charm. Or so he'd been told, often by bartenders trying to rush him out at closing. No, it was more that every time he found himself in a place where people wore robes that didn't have pockets, his instincts screamed wrong place, wrong job, wrong species. The shuttle that picked him up from the outer ring of Station 12 was sleek, silent, and piloted by a woman who may have been part machine. Her voice had that synthetic lilt, and her eyes blinked in binary. She offered him a beverage that tasted like strawberries and regret, and he spent most of the ride staring out the window, trying to calm the storm in his gut. Elin 4's orbit hadn't changed, but everything else had. The moon, once known for being a backwater jungle planet, now pulsed with signs of modernity. Orbital docks, sensor relays, even a slow but unmistakable ring of defense satellites blinking against the stars like a stern cosmic eyebrow. Someone had been busy. The palace came into view as the shuttle began its descent. It floated just above the surface of a mountain blanketed in emerald mist, anchored to the rock below by massive gravity tethers that shimmered with stabilizing energy. The structure was alien elegance incarnate. Curved spires, translucent domes catching the twin suns like dew on spider silk, and long walkways that looped into the air as if drawn by a celestial brush. Reese had seen a lot of architecture in his time, but nothing quite like this. It was like stepping into a dream someone had partially outsourced to an artist and a physicist arguing over aesthetics. As he disembarked, a pair of guards met him, tall, stone-faced, and elaborately armored in living wood that twisted and regrew as they moved. One had a spear that hummed at his approach. The other offered a curt nod. "Captain Reese Ander," one of them intoned. "The Queen awaits. Please do not attempt to touch anything that glows." "Not even my ego?" Reese muttered, earning zero reaction. Tough crowd. They escorted him through the palace's winding halls, each more opulent than the last. Vines crept along the walls, but they glowed faintly with bioluminescence, and parted politely as he passed. Decorative panels displayed Elani history. Scenes of war, peace, unity, and something that looked suspiciously like a giant squirrel defeating a robot in a duel. He didn't ask. Finally, they brought him to the central chamber. It was vast, circular, and open to the jungle below, protected by a shimmering shield that rippled with energy. Dozens of advisors stood along the edges, draped in colors that probably signified something important. At the far end, on a raised dais that looked carved from a fallen star, sat the queen, Valira. Reese's mouth went dry. She had grown. Of course she had grown. It had been 15 years. But the change still hit him like a plasma round to the chest. She was tall now, regal, dressed in flowing garments laced with silver thread that caught the light and danced with it. Her long ears were adorned with delicate metal bands, the tips twitching subtly as if listening to the room beyond sound. Her silver eyes met his, and something ancient flickered there. Memory, recognition, amusement. She rose. "Captain Ander," she said. Her voice was smooth, low, with the same melodic cadence he remembered, only now honed into command. "I am honored you answered my summons." Reese inclined his head. Couldn't resist a royal invite. Plus, I owed you a visit. You know, for the whole saving your life from wild jungle beasts thing. That earned the faintest curve of her lips. I remember, she said. I also remember you tripping over your own boots while carrying me. Stylish acrobatics, he said. I call it tactical falling. There was a snort somewhere in the room. One of the advisors hid it behind a cough. Valira stepped down from the dais. Her gaze never left his. Much has changed since that day, Reese. Elan 4 is no longer divided. We are one nation now, one people. But that unity is fragile, and some among the stars would see it broken. He took a step forward, instinctively standing straighter. And you need me to help stop that from happening? I need someone I trust, she replied simply. And you, Captain, are the only human I've ever trusted. There was a pause, an awkward, heavy kind of silence, broken only by the sound of a guard sneezing somewhere behind a pillar. Well, Reese said, that's either very flattering or deeply concerning. She smiled just a little. Both. He followed her as she led him out onto a high balcony overlooking the jungle canopy. Flying beasts soared beneath them, wings catching golden light. In the distance, a spire of dark metal rose from the treetops, out of place, menacing in its precision. That, she said, pointing to the tower, is Orcs Systems Embassy. They call it diplomacy. I call it encroachment. He squinted. Orcs? I thought they specialized in weapons and questionable mining ethics. They do, she said. And now they've found something beneath our soil. Something ancient. Something powerful. Reese frowned. Let me guess. You want me to dig around where I probably shouldn't, make some enemies, and possibly end up on fire? She turned to him, eyes gleaming. Exactly, he sighed. You know, when I woke up this morning, I told myself I wouldn't get involved in any interplanetary intrigue. Did it work? Number one also told myself I'd stop drinking caffeine from unmarked vials. That didn't work either. She laughed, clear and ringing. The sound was lighter than anything he'd heard in the chamber below. For a moment, just a flicker. They were the same. Him a scruffy pilot, her a curious girl with long ears and a wounded leg. Then the moment passed. The Queen straightened. The advisors were already gathering. Plans had to be made. Dangers loomed. And Rhys Ander, reluctant hero and amateur comedian, had just been recruited into a game far bigger than he liked. He ran a hand through his hair, glanced once more at the Orc spire, and muttered, Next time I save someone, I'm asking for a receipt. Rhys had faced pirates, warlords, sentient clouds with abandonment issues, and once an accountant who tried to invoice him for the air he breathed, but none of that prepared him for Ilani royal protocol. He'd barely agreed to help Valira when she informed him he had to undergo a ritual of welcome, which sounded deceptively charming until he was stripped of his coat, handed a robe that made him look like a confused cultist, and escorted by two very serious guards into a chamber that smelled like tree sap and destiny. This is normal, Rhys muttered, staring up at a floating orb that blinked at him with what he could only describe as bureaucratic malice. Completely normal, just another day. Wake up, brush teeth, pledge my soul to a forest moon. The orb hummed and emitted a cloud of blue mist that temporarily dyed his eyebrows purple. Across from him stood a priestess, tall, regal, with skin like polished bark and eyes that glittered with something suspiciously close to amusement. She chanted something in Ilani, dipped a branch-like staff into a bowl of glowing moss, and anointed his forehead. You are now ritually acknowledged as a guest of the High Grove, she intoned. Do I get a fruit basket? Rhys asked. No, she replied. The ceremony ended, and Rhys was handed back his jacket, still damp, oddly enough, and ushered through a winding series of corridors lit by floating spores that pulsed to the rhythm of his footsteps. He tried not to step on anything with more than 4 legs. The palace was alive in a way most structures weren't. Walls that shifted slightly to make way, doors that opened only after humming a short note, and windows that turned opaque when they felt stared at too long. Eventually, he found himself in a war room that looked like it had been designed by a collaboration between a botanical garden and a military genius with a flair for drama. The central table was a live projection of Elan 4's surface, floating above a carved root base that seemed to shift as strategies changed. Advisors murmured in various dialects. Valira stood at the head, radiant and fierce, her long ears adorned with small crystalline nodes that shimmered as she listened. She gestured to him. "Captain Ander, you're just in time to hear about the giant subterranean machine that might destroy us all." "Ah," Reese said, sliding into the nearest seat. "Breakfast conversations on this planet really are something else." One of the advisors, short, sharp-eyed, wearing a helmet that looked like it had antennae just for style, pointed to a point on the map. "Orcs Systems has drilled into what appears to be an ancient relic. It emits low-frequency pulses, disrupts surrounding wildlife, and occasionally causes local gravity to misbehave." "Misbehave," Reese echoed. "Last week, a patrol unit floated 20 meters into the air and didn't come down for an hour," the advisor said flatly. "Sounds like my last date." Valera's lips twitched. "The relic is older than any known Elani structure, perhaps even pre-Exodus. We believe it is a world key, a device that interacts with the planet's core. Oryx believes it's a power source." Reese leaned back. "And let me guess, they want to dig it up, plug it into something, and see what happens." "Worse," she said, "they want to claim the site under the Interplanetary Corporate Accord. If they succeed, they'll have legal control. We can't allow that. So you want me to, what, sneak in and take a look before they activate the space blender?" "Essentially," she replied. "You're an outsider. You can move without raising political flags, and if things go wrong—" She paused. "Well, you've survived worse." I'm not sure if that's a compliment or an ominous foreshadowing. It's Elani diplomacy. A day later, Reese found himself on a dropship with a motley crew of specialists. A botanist named Jun, who spoke to plants and believed they sometimes gossiped. A cybernetic engineer named Darrow, who replaced his own hand with a multifunctional wrench for aesthetic purposes. And a translator drone that insisted on interpreting metaphors literally. "This is the most advanced team we can offer under the radar," Valira had said. "And I suppose you expect me to be the charming glue holding them together?" "I expect you to try not to blow anything up unless absolutely necessary." Reese sighed. "Define necessary." The jungle welcomed them with its usual level of hostility, buzzing insects, strange rustling sounds, and a tree that attempted to eat the drone before June gently convinced it to reconsider. They trekked for hours until the Oryx compound came into view. Sleek steel towers, humming generators, and hovering security drones that buzzed like caffeinated wasps. "Subtle," Reese muttered. "They've gone with the invade an ecosystem aesthetic." They made camp in a hidden grove, cloaked by foliage, and a series of scent-masking sprays Jun insisted were ethically sourced from cooperative moss colonies. Reese didn't ask. That night, Reese lay on his back, staring at the stars through the canopy. The drone buzzed nearby, mumbling something about idioms and their biological implausibility. Valira's face swam in his thoughts. Older now, sharper, but still carrying the quiet gravity of the girl he'd saved. The stakes were bigger, the danger more pronounced. But part of him, an inconvenient, stubborn part, felt the same drive to protect. He sighed, rolled over, and pulled his jacket tighter around himself. Tomorrow they'd infiltrate the Oryx dig site. Tonight he just hoped he didn't wake up with another bug licking his forehead. The compound loomed before them like a misplaced limb of some mechanical god, all angles and arrogance, humming with the quiet menace of advanced tech left in the hands of morally flexible corporations. Reese crouched low in the underbrush, peering through a set of binoculars that did more whispering than magnifying. "Security drones make a full sweep every 9.2 minutes, Darrow said behind him, fiddling with his multi-wrench hand as if he were tuning a violin and not a limb. "Cameras are running thermal and motion detection, standard Oryx overkill. But I can disrupt the feed for 60 seconds if you like." Reese grinned. "Oh, I like very much." Jun was already whispering to the surrounding vines, coaxing a cluster of creepers to curl around a nearby sensor post like it was some sort of jungle pole dancer audition. "They'll think it's just seasonal growth," she said. "These plants are excellent at mimicry. Also, they don't like being watched." I relate to that deeply, Reese muttered. The translator drone hovered nearby, bobbing like an anxious jellyfish. Statement interpreted, emotional connection established with photophobic flora. Suggested diagnosis, paranoia. I'm going to rewire you into a coffee machine if you keep this up, Reese hissed. I would prefer that over reformatting, the drone replied cheerfully. They waited for the next patrol cycle, hearts thumping, except for the drone, who thumped in solidarity out of some strange courtesy algorithm. When the drones buzzed past and the camera blinked out, Darrow gave a thumbs up, and they moved. The compound was quiet in the way quiet things often are before they explode. Inside, it was all polished metal and soft lighting, faux elegance over a core of clinical greed. They moved through corridors that smelled like recycled air and ozone, passing empty break rooms with protein bar wrappers still on the tables, and a vending machine that seemed oddly sinister. Reese briefly entertained the idea that it dispensed betrayal. At last, they reached the central shaft, a massive chamber cut deep into the jungle's bones, descending into a spiraling ramp lined with scanning beacons. Below, the machine pulsed faintly, like it was dreaming in its sleep. It wasn't made of metal so much as something else, something older. The surface was smooth but rippled slightly, as if it remembered being alive. Strange sigils crawled across it in slow-moving lines of energy. I don't think this was built, Jun whispered. I think it grew. Terrific, Reese muttered. We're dealing with a techno plant. What's next, philosophical ferns? Darrow crouched beside a panel connected to the relic via a thick umbilical of cables. They're feeding it energy. Low voltage for now, but they're ramping it up daily. At this rate, they'll breach full activation in 3 days. Maybe less if someone decides to hit the go boom button early. Which they will, Reese said, because no one's ever looked at an ancient alien relic and thought, let's leave that alone. He tapped his comm. Villyra, are you getting this? Static, then her voice edged with concern. I'm receiving partial telemetry. What do you see? A relic that's humming like a lullaby with teeth, Orcs tech everywhere, and a glowing sigil that looks suspiciously like a middle finger in a Lanny script. That's the symbol for unity through silence, actually. Same thing. There was a soft hiss. A door opened behind them. Reese spun, blaster drawn, and nearly shot a janitor. The poor man dropped his mop and held his hands high. Whoa, I'm just here to clean the vents. Who cleans vents in the middle of the night? Reese snapped. I do when the spiders complain. There was a beat, then June nodded solemnly. He's telling the truth. The spiders here are very vocal. The janitor blinked. You can hear them too? Okay, Reese said, lowering his weapon. I've officially entered the part of the mission where sanity is optional. The janitor scurried off, muttering something about 8-legged unions. Back at the edge of the shaft, Darrow stood. We can't stop this from the outside. The control relay is embedded in the relic's matrix. We'd need to interface directly. Define interface. Physically enter the relic's command lattice and override the awakening protocol. So, crawl into the space rock and press the big red button marked Don't. Essentially, Reese rubbed his face. Why is it always me? Jun handed him a bioluminescent root. This will keep you grounded while inside. It's a vegetable. It's sentient. Be respectful. He sighed. I miss spaceships. Spaceships never ask you to emotionally bond with produce. He took the root, climbed down the ramp, and stepped onto the relic's surface. It rippled beneath his boots, and a low hum filled his ears, like a song sung by something too old to remember why it started singing. The relic opened, not with noise, but with a gentle sigh, as if exhaling after a long nap. A seam split, revealing an entrance slick with shimmering light and symbols that rearranged themselves to welcome him, or warn him, depending on the mood of the interpreter. Reese turned back. If I don't come back in an hour, tell Villyra I died heroically, or tripping over my own feet. Honestly, either's plausible, Darrow grinned. We'll go with heroic, unless there's footage. He stepped inside. The relic swallowed him whole. The inside of the relic was impossible. Reese had been aboard derelict cruisers lost to time, had strolled through zero-gravity museums orbiting neutron stars, had once even survived a dinner party on a pleasure moon with diplomats who communicated exclusively in interpretive dance. But this was something different. The walls weren't walls at all, but folds of shimmering logic and light. They bent in response to his thoughts, rearranged as if his presence here was a question and the relic was searching for the answer. The floor beneath his boots pulsed like a heart, and the glowing root John had given him twitched gently in his hand, like a child's fingers wrapped around a parent's. He would have been deeply unnerved by this if he weren't already 10 layers beyond normal discomfort. Okay, he muttered. Step 1, don't die. Step 2, figure out what ancient cosmic toaster wants. Step 3, ideally don't become part of its recipe. The inner chamber opened before him like a flower, revealing what could only be described as a control core. If your definition of a control core included floating platforms, a central crystalline obelisk singing equations, and a levitating spiral of symbols that radiated heatless fire, at the base of the obelisk sat a chair, or a throne, or a test seat. Reese honestly wasn't sure, but it looked like it was waiting for someone. Let me guess, he said aloud. The ancient supertech wants a user, and because I'm the one dumb enough to be standing here, the throne lit up. With a reluctant sigh and a final pat on the root, which emitted what could only be called an encouraging squelch, Reese stepped into the seat. The universe inhaled. There was a rush of sensation. Stars being born, planets crumbling, the laughter of something that had never had a mouth. His mind stretched out, flickering through the relic's vast alien memories. It was a world key, yes, but not a weapon. A seed, a regulator, a governor of planetary balance, meant to communicate with the core of Elan 4 and keep it in harmony with its biosphere. But the Orcs drilling, the power injections, had triggered a failsafe. If the relic sensed too great a disruption, if it believed the planet was falling out of harmony, it would initiate a restructuring protocol. Translation: Elan 4 would be purged, reborn through fire and tectonic tantrum. Oh, that's bad, Reese whispered, the data spiraling through him like a storm of thoughts not his own. That's very bad. But there was something else, a failsafe within the failsafe, a second key, imprinted with genetic markers. A bond, Valira. Of course, she was born here, her DNA, her voice, part of Elan 4's living network. The relic remembered her, even if she'd never entered it. Reese reached out through the link. Valira, if you can hear this. Static, then her voice. Reese, where are you? In the heart of an angry planet, kind of wishing I had a manual right about now. Her breath caught. I can't track you. You've vanished from every scanner. Guess I've become quantumly shy. He paused. Valira, I need your help. The relic's ready to go nuclear. But it knows you. If we link, merge, even briefly, it might let us rewrite the protocol. She didn't hesitate. Tell me what to do. Together, through a tangle of cyber-organic filaments and pulsing biosignal conduits, they formed the link. Reese held the connection steady as Valira's voice echoed through the relic's network, not in words, but in intent, in memory. He showed it the girl who had once been lost in the jungle, bleeding and frightened. She showed it the queen she had become, strong, unyielding, a protector of her people. The relic listened. The fire receded. The structure began to power down, its internal systems humming into dormancy. The failsafe unraveled. The restructuring was aborted. Reese slumped back in the throne, dizzy and lightheaded. Well, he croaked, I didn't die, which, if we're honest, was not a guarantee. Valira's voice came through again, clearer this time. You always find a way, Reese. Mostly by accident. Still counts. He emerged from the relic hours later, blinking into the soft dawn light that filtered through the jungle canopy. Darrow, Jun, and the drone greeted him with relief. The translator immediately declared him mildly radioactive, but heroically coiffed. Reese could live with that. Later, back at the Alani Palace, Valira met him beneath the boughs of the grand spire. She wore a simpler dress now, her crown absent, her long ears glinting in the light like slender blades. You saved us, she said. He shrugged. Technically, we saved each other. Plus, I had help from a talking root and a hallucinogenic alien chair. She stepped closer. Still, I remember the boy who pulled me from the river. I didn't know then what he would become. And what do you see now, he asked. She smiled. A man who's impossible to forget. They stood there in silence for a while, the stars turning slowly above them. Reese didn't know what would come next. Maybe peace, maybe war, probably bureaucracy. But for now, he was exactly where he needed to be. And for the first time in a long while, he wasn't running. The end.